Well, good evening, everyone. I'm super happy to be here tonight in this special edition of GENAM's Book Club. As you might know, GENAM is a group of research and studies in literature, art, and narrative of the University of São Paulo, Brazil. I'm super happy to be here having you all, our members, and also our dear guests tonight, Dr. Alan Remde. Alan is a family doctor here in the United States, in New Jersey. He is also a professor and a preceptor at St. Luke's University. So he practices medicine, but he also teaches medicine. He advises students and junior physicians, right? So he has this practical side of medicine and also the teaching side, the educational side of medicine, which most of us also have around here or had, right? So this is very important. It's an honor to have you here, hear about your experience. And Alan is also a researcher here in the United States, so he has lots of articles published on medicine, nutrition, the relation between medicine, nutrition, and integrative medicine. So he has lots to tell us about this long experience that he has. But also, what made me invite Alan tonight was one of his stories. So we are among writers here too, and people who study literature. So this is very important. And I was very impressed because he, in one of our almost weekly meetings, because Alan, my other dear Alan, who's here, my neighbor and friend, they practice Tai Chi Chuan. Yeah?
Yes.
Am I right? Okay.
That's right.
Oh, now my mind just went, okay, is it Tai Chi Chuan? Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Together for a long time now, and they have this Saturday morning classes, and they always have lunch together at the end. As long as I'm here for 1.5 years, they started to invite me to these lunches. So we have this wonderful conversations almost every week. And then Alan Remde, Dr. Remde, when one of these Saturday lunches, he said, I think next time I'm going to tell you the story of how I became a doctor. And we were very anxious about it. He listened to the story. I wanted to know how he became a doctor, right? And then the next day, he told this story. And I was listening to the story, and I knew all about Alan's practice already, and we had discussed some things and about nutrition and narrative medicine, and he was interested in our work too. So we had these conversations, and then he was telling that story, or personal story. And what impressed me was not only the story itself, because the story is very unique, facts of the story, but also the way he was telling the stories. Well, this is wonderful. So he impressed me not only by the story of how he became a doctor, but also as a narrator. So you are here today because you're a physician and a narrator, Alan. And so, and I really wanted, people, GENAM's members and everybody to know more about you and your unique relationship with medicine and also with stories. So tonight I asked Hélio, the GENAM's member and surgeon, because there's something about this story about surgery, as Alan Goodhart just told us in the beginning. So I invited Hélio to lead the way tonight and to be the moderator of this conversation. I want to welcome everyone. I see Jekeli here. Jekeli is also a doctor, a physician. Selma is also a physician. So we have more physicians tonight than people from arts and humanities. Incredibly same, because we I, Andrea, come from the arts. Bronia is coming. Bronia is a psychologist. So many people of healthcare practitioners and professionals here tonight. We are honored to have you here. I'm super happy to host you tonight. And Hélio, it's with you now. Okay?
Sure.
Let me start welcoming Alan. And I will start with a simple question, okay? When I read your text, I was completely, I don't know, it's overtaken, you know?
Okay.
So the feelings were very strong. And I imagine that for a child, 11-year-old child, the feelings were very strong too. But I would like to know about your feelings, not when you were 11 years old, but what about now, as you grew up, and when you see this text, and with everything in your life, how do you feel now when you read it?
That's an interesting question, Aliyah. How do I feel now? I feel I owe a lot. So I feel, sometimes you've been given so much in life. I feel I owe a lot, basically. That's how I feel, to a great extent. And I feel a responsibility of some sort that's not particularly well defined, but I feel a responsibility for living a certain way, and with my fellow humans, sharing and supporting. That's how I feel.
I ask this because we have a direction in this group, and that it means that the discourse actually, the words, they actually mean what they are. They are not just writings. They are facts. They influence people's life. Fabiana has an article named "What to Do with Words." That's right.
How to change lives.
How to change lives with words. That's it. So this is our north, and I felt exactly the same. That this test changed your life.
Yeah.
And so this is amazing. That's why I question of your feelings right now. And I guess you give this test to your students, to your residents. And what do you get from them in return? What do they say, or what do they say that they feel when they read it?
I haven't given this text to my other students, actually.
Why not?
Well, maybe I will. Maybe I will. No, I've shared, just with your group. It's the only person I've shared with at this point.
Really? We are the first?
We are honored.
So honored.
No,
Because it's a
I just put that out
beautiful
on a paper. I just kind of let it spill out of me on, you know, in a few hours, and that was it. So the, you know, I don't see, this is fairly new to me because, you know, I like writing. But it's not something I have particularly formally developed, you know. And there's a lot I don't understand of how writing relates to one's own memories of one's own life trajectory, or how it affects others. You know, so it's not really a world I live in a lot, you know, unlike you guys, apparently, you know, but it's actually a world I'm very interested in. So this is all quite new to me. You know, because I live in a world, you know, on the one hand, that's highly conceptual, facts and figures, you know, which all doctors have to know, of course. And but on the other hand, I have this other side of my mind that I very much, you know, practice living with a kind of in touch with my own energy, if you will, my own body, my own energy. And this is sort of kind of what I'm getting at a little bit in this writing. So this writing actually kind of surprises me. It just kind of poured out of me. You know, I didn't plan this or anything. It just poured out of me after just over a few hours. That's I don't write on a regular basis. I don't formally know much about writing. I don't know much about narrative medicine. And so a question for me of kind of, you know, practicing kind of living in my body and with my energy, you know, because I'm also an acupuncturist. So I listen to my own bioenergy. I mean, I will literally lay in bed and I will practice listening to my energy flows, you know, which we all have, but somebody who practices acupuncture or Tai Chi and meditation for many years, you know, perhaps is a little more, you know, adept at, just like a composer of music probably hears the sounds a little, you know, better than I would, right? So for me, this writing business is, I don't know if it's a bridge, you know, between these worlds, because there's this conceptual world, and then there's this kind of moment to moment kind of bioenergetic body world that I live in. And these are very different facets of myself. And so it was interesting to me that expressing things on paper, which again, I don't do very often, was actually quite helpful to me. If that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm making sense to you, but you know, this is what I feel. So
makes total sense.
Yeah, but it's interesting because there are exactly this. There are two different worlds. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you transit between both. That it's almost as we used to say that we have frontiers between health and disease or illness. Yeah. So we transit, we pass this, we cross these boundaries every time in our lives. So this is quite similar. But I would like to know, I am a teacher too.
Right.
Okay, so I taught for many years, and I'm a researcher, and dealing with students and residents, it's very difficult for us, at least nowadays, to convince them that this what you called uh, integrative medicine or integrative medicine, that this is an important thing, because we are becoming very technical,
Yeah.
but not human.
Yeah.
That's it.
I
We
would,
are almost
I would have
robots.
to agree with you sometimes, you know, acknowledging how hard people work in the healthcare field with great respect to all the specialists and all the different fields, you know, but I think there's truth in what you say. And, you know, I studied some evidence-based medicine. You know, I'm also a researcher, you know. I studied some evidence-based medicine. I took some of the original courses in evidence-based medicine, and really interested me, and I thought it was very valuable. But I also realized it could become the next tyranny. And it's like anything, it's what you do with it, how you approach it, you know. And I think in some ways, you know, evidence-based medicine, you know, which I love in many ways, has become the next tyranny.
Yeah, that's our feelings too, because I guess they inverted this the meaning of the evidence-based medicine.
Yeah.
And I guess you are right. It's the next tyranny as well. But
because if I may just continue saying something on that, the originators of evidence medicine never stated that it was supposed to be the totality of medicine. They talked about something called clinical jazz. That is, you would combine the best scientific evidence and the artistry and creativity of medicine, and you would combine them into clinical jazz. But I think the second part has gotten lost to a great degree.
Talking about jazz, I know you are a choir singer.
I used to sing very, very amateur level. I think that the church where I sang was very short on more bass singers, so they admitted
I thought
whatsoever.
I thought that you
just...
use this to teach your students, your residents, so you don't sing to them.
But you're getting me inspired with all sorts of great ideas here. So
no, because actually this is we are talking about art, not only about literature, not only about writing, but about art in general. So how do you use this knowledge, all this general concepts that you have from many places, from Tai Chi, from music, from arts, painters, how do you put all of this together, and how do you use this, if you do, to teach your students? Well, we are very interested in this student stuff, you know.
Sure. So one thing I try to teach, you know, residents and students is use your heart as a stethoscope. So I even have a little game. I'll say, go into the room, you know, introduce yourself, you know, make some small talk and establish rapport. And then excuse yourself after 30 seconds, come out and tell me, are they very sick, moderately sick, or only mildly sick? And you get 30 seconds.
This is It's quite as elevator talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
you have 1 minute to expose all your things and to acquire the acceptance of the other one. And how are the results of this?
Well, it's like anything. Some are receptive. Some residents are very touched with the integrative medicine approach, and others really aren't very interested, and everything in between. You know, so it kind of depends, I think, where they are. You know, emotionally, psychologically, developmentally. You know, themselves. So I need to kind of tailor my message according to where they are. And so each resident's their own person, you know, is different, and they're following their own path. And so my job is to kind of support them in whatever path they're following, and, you know, not try to mold them particularly. So like I had one resident recently who was very touched with the integrative medicine approach. In fact, he was accepted for a fellowship at Johns Hopkins, a very, you know, esteemed school, and in preventive and community medicine, and he was very much influenced by this approach that I take. So what I kind of play with, and I don't have some, you know, formula or answer particularly, but I play with, you know, listening, you know, intellectually to all the facts and stuff, but then also listening with my heart. And then, you know, I'll actually check the pulses and practice reading their bioenergy, because, you know, one of my sayings is the body never lies. You know, we all tell ourselves stories, but the body never lies. And so if I can feel what their energy is like, you know, is their energy smooth, or is it all prickly? You know, is it, and that tells me a lot about where they're at and perhaps what treatment they may need. So I have a lot of patients, for example, with chronic pain. That's why I studied acupuncture. I actually wrote a book in a national textbook on integrative approach to chronic pain, and realized that the evidence base for acupuncture was actually surprisingly reasonable. You know, it's not great, but it's reasonable. So that's why I studied acupuncture, and so I could see the usual treatment of chronic pain is usually pills or procedures, and they both have their place, of course. But, you know, I have most of my patients with chronic pain doing meditation and Qigong, and a lot doing acupuncture, in addition to pills and procedures, you know, which again are perfectly legitimate approaches. So, you know, I try to meet people where they're at, and there's a lot of resistance, because I'm kind of sweeping against the tide of an entire culture which has a different idea of what medicine is. So
it's amazing that you do this kind of medicine in the United States.
Yeah.
I can imagine this in India or other places that they are more
spiritual.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, and this is something that we are trying to do here, at least to teach our students to do this. And let's talk about your test again. Tell us why this ceremony, this Indian ceremony, led you in the way to be a doctor, but not in this regular way. Let's say this.
Yeah.
Just tell us something about this.
Can I just jump into this just a little before. I don't know if everyone had the opportunity to read the text. If you allow me, I would like to read a paragraph of the text so that everybody can, get the feeling of it. Just the first paragraph. My accent is not Alan's accent. I can't read it. Okay, is it okay? So, rain in the desert. When I was about 11 years old, I traveled in a caravan of fellow seekers to the enchanted land of the Southwest. One morning, we got up way before dawn and traveled in our old station wagon through the starlit desert to a destination known only to our elders. Hours later, arriving as the sun's power began to declare itself on the eastern horizon, we gazed before us at a great mesa rising high up into the sky from the desert floor. Slowly, we I don't know how to pronounce this. Spiraled up the dusty, narrow dirt, the narrow dirt road, hugging its precipitous sides, finally arriving at the flat top of the mesa, where already hundreds were gathered for the annual Hopi snake dance. White men were rarely welcome in that pueblo, perched high above the desert, given the history of genocidal relations against their kind. But on this special day, we were welcome, if only cautiously. I found my place on the parched dirt among the tightly packed Indians in the central plaza and waited. The drums began. Mother Earth drums with a deep rhythm that reached deep inside, deep, monotonous to the thinking mind, but calling the depths. Slowly, Hopi Indians, wearing nothing but loin clothes and ceremonial tattoos, shuffle danced into the plaza. The crowd, now numbering a couple of thousand, crammed into this little desert plaza high above the arid plains, was quiet. As more Indians slowly danced to the rhythm into the square, they formed a natural oval. At the far end of this oval of dance was a little structure, and as each Indian passed it, they would stop, reach in, and pick up a live rattlesnake. Hours later, having picked up a new rattlesnake with each pass around the oval, they each would have a dozen or so rattlesnakes writhing around their body as they slowly danced in the ever-increasing intensity of desert sun. How little did my 11-year-old mind comprehend the scene, but something deeper inside heard the drums, heard the call. Okay, Hélio, now you can go further with your question.
No, Alan, please.
Yeah.
I can read a little if you want me to.
Yeah,
okay. All right, you can, of course.
Because the next part follows, of course. The day was done, and we traveled home through the parched landscape. It had not rained for many weeks. That evening, we camped in an arroyo, a dry desert riverbed. Being largely from the metropolitan East, we knew nothing of the ways of the Southwest deserts. In the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of thunder and pounding rain. The tent floor was already a small pond, and the sogginess of my sleeping bag had pulled me out of my weary slumber. Everybody was utterly soaked. The arroyo was filling with water. There was a danger we could be swept away in a flash flood. Quickly, we broke camp and moved our tents to higher ground. It was only later that I made the connection between the snake dance which is a sacred rain dance and the downpour of that night.
Okay. Now I return to my question. Okay, tell us more about this.
How this
ceremony
led Alan to being a physician. And let's see if this is true or fiction.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this would be many factors, you know, and I think this was one of many impressions that kind of helped me get out of my head, if you will. And I'm sure many more are needed. I think we take in impressions on many different levels, and many of them on an unconscious level, basically. So a lot of the impression, I think, was on an unconscious level.
Can I say just fast? I a book about this experience. It doesn't matter if it was real or fiction or something that you created in your mind, but it's interesting anyway. Create a history if you don't have all the details, but write what you have in your mind. Doesn't matter if it's true. It's a good story.
It's an amazing essay.
Yeah.
And I would say, no, I said that being fictional, maybe it's not the best word for that, because I know when Alan told the story about how he became a physician, it was not that story. He can tell us the story later, maybe, but let's speak about this text a little bit more. Everything is related, of course. Everything is integrated, right? Nothing is separated, of course. But the physician was inside the 11-year-old boy. That's true. Because the physician is born from the 11-year-old boy in the text, right? We have 3 Allens in the text. We have the 11-year-old boy, right? We have the second one is the recently graduated. Is this the second one?
Yeah, recently graduated, yeah.
Yeah, and the third one, I read it many times, but I think my mind is not good. And we have 3 Allens text,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And all of them are Alan, right? The person that we have here tonight, right? So that's it.
May I ask you something?
Sure.
Dr. Remde, I've read your text and I kept thinking, if you are trying to tell us that you became a more humanist, a more instinctive doctor, more than some rational colleagues that didn't have this kind of experiences, and that you use your this instinctive intuition in your way of being a doctor.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I try to stay in touch with these other impressions, in the way I'm a doctor. Yeah.
I asked this because the rest of the text, when you tell us about your personal experience with your family, and then this guy who didn't believe on himself, you were doing something else and different from giving a medicine or or even being a psychologist, because you were, even a gesture was important. A gesture that made you feel that you had an energy that could pass through you in order to mean something to the next person.
Yeah.
So is this something that you are conscious of when it happens, or is something that you only think about after thinking about the results?
Yeah, I say, that, I'm often not particularly conscious in the ordinary sense of the term when, sometimes, I need to let go of my head, as I say. I would say I have a very strong thought engine, right? So I have a very strong mind that way, for better or worse, and as many physicians do. But I need to trust in a kind of other aspects of myself so they can speak in an appropriate moment with the patient. So when I spoke to this patient who was kind of down and out and thought he was a nobody, I was speaking completely sincerely. And
at this moment, let me just interrupt you for a second. At this moment, you changed a life with your words.
Yeah. You
did it.
Yeah.
You were acting with words.
Yeah.
Not with
I don't usually think of it that way, but now that you say it, I think that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think, Alan, that, because one of the things that I thought when I read your amazing essay, it's very important, as I said, as a writer, not only as a physician, I have to compliment you. It's very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I was thinking that you mention it more or less literally when you say in the text, you're very conscious that with the Indians, for example, there were cultural differences.
There's a huge gap.
So it was a cultural encounter, right?
Yeah. Huge gap.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So with the Indians, it was that. With the person, the person that helped the neighbors, it was maybe not a cultural gap, but certainly a social gap, right?
Yeah.
That you were aware of, right?
Yeah.
You were crossing the border.
Yeah.
Again, and seeing the other beyond border, right? Beyond the border, and that was Hélio was saying at the beginning, crossing the border and back, crossing the border and back. So even if your father, you were crossing the border.
Yeah.
Border, and now I know why I didn't remember the third Alan, because today I was working, emotionally working, let's say, on my own father's passing with my therapist. So Freud probably would explain this, that I just forgot the part that you were speaking about your father, because I was trying to work on my emotions about my father's passing, right? So, well, but now I just read again text and remember. So as I was saying, that was also crossing the border between health and illness, the border between life and death, right? Yeah. And it's interesting because when you speak about the person that helped the other canines, right? You mentioned that called my attention very much. You mentioned that he died before.
Yeah.
He died before. So I don't know, maybe it was literal, right? Because
No, he literally did die before. He coded and was resuscitated. And he told me that he saw a being of light, and he decided it was not his time to go, and he returned. But at that moment, when I saw him in the office, he was very despondent, and his, there's huge, I think you make a good point, because there's huge boundaries, socioeconomically, status-wise, physicians are high status, right? And, he's basically, not a high status person. He's not from a high socioeconomic class. He doesn't have much education. And so actually, I really appreciate you bringing up this point, because that's kind of what integrative medicine's all about, is crossing borders and crossing silos that we've often erected because of our own limitations or our own, conceits or our own conditioning of some sort. And so I'm crossing a boundary. I'm crossing a boundary culturally with the Indians. I'm crossing a socioeconomic boundary, and I'm actually crossing a boundary, at somebody at the point of death, and I usually think I'm kind of in control, but it's very clear to me that I was not in charge. I kind of like to be in charge, as most do. We all have our conceit of wanting to be in charge, but I wasn't in charge. I at least had the openness to let something else be in charge. Right,
and this is also crossing a border.
Yeah, it's also crossing a border in me too, because I'm letting go of being in charge as a self,
Yeah, and it's beautiful because, sorry, just let me just finish, Bernie. So it's beautiful because you cross borders in your own practice. You put everything together. You cross borders, but you're like a continent, right? Because you have lots of countries, but you're always crossing the borders, and if you look from above, it's a whole continent, right? Because
that's sort of
between evidence-based medicine and integrative medicine, crossing borders between Western medicine and Eastern philosophy and medicine. So right, it's beautiful.
And it's sort of the job description of integrative medicine. Is our job description is to cross borders in an appropriate way, as informed by best evidence, and bring in other systems. So in order to do that, the inner work that, this isn't just an outer thing. The inner work is I need to practice my own, knowing myself as best I can. I can't just be in my head. I have to listen to my heart. I have to listen to my body. I have to listen, as best I can. And I fail many times, but as best I can, I have to practice being aware of everything that's going on, all the parts, because the siloing, the partitioning or siloing or separateness in medicine is a reflection of the separateness in humans. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if medicine, if healing is going to change, the first priority is a shift in consciousness. If the world's going to change, the first priority is a shift in consciousness. And so in my own little way, in my very modest attempts, I need to practice that daily. And, you know, I forget often, but, you know, I practice, you know, meditation. I practice, you know, kind of a mindfulness throughout the day as best I can, as, you know, just as a little person. So integrative medicine isn't just a outer practice of medicine, you know, it's an inner practice, and the two correspond to each other. It wouldn't be humanly possible in a real way to practice integrative medicine if I didn't practice being more integrated myself. Is that making sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Remde, did you want to say anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to ask, if I may. Okay, we can understand you quite well, and we are here nodding that this is the way we think that it should be. Although we know it's not the way it actually is in general. So how is your practice seen by your colleagues? So how much can your acting and the results of your acting also change the context around you, your colleagues, the way they approach their patients? Are they learning anything with your way?
Sure. So just as I have to meet patients where they're at, right? I have to accept where they're at. I have to accept where my colleagues are at. And I learned a lot from them also, you know, don't get me wrong. So it works both ways, and they probably have to, you know, they have to put up with me and accept where I'm at also, right? So I actually used to work at Mount Sinai, an Institute for Health in New York City, for about 4 years. And, you know, I started where my present job about 4 or 5 years ago, actually now. And when I entered, you know, they really needed a faculty member. They kind of knew I did some sort of strange thing called integrative medicine, but wasn't sure what the heck it was. And so I learned a lot of diplomacy skills. You know, I always stay respectful, and, you know, and I started a whole integrative medicine series, which I teach the residents. So every month I give a presentation on an integrative medicine topic. And I can say that I have shifted the norm in some things at my center. For example, pretty much all the residents are very commonly talking to the patients about proper nutrition, because, you know, if you look at the scientific data, you know, on scientifically valid indices of healthy eating, 60 to 80% of Americans are in the poor category, you know, which is the main driver of chronic disease. So, and I have a bit of, you know, research background. I published, you know, systematic review on nutrition, you know, so I kind of know what the science is fairly well. And I've, you know, I have to repeat things over and over. I'm a preceptor, so I'm asking the resident, well, okay, the patient is suffering from depression. Did you talk to them about what they eat? And at first they thought that it had nothing to do with it. You know, how could what you eat have anything to do with their depression? Actually, the scientific data that it shows it has a lot to do with their depression. But after a couple of years of that, they if somebody suffers from depression, they ask what they eat. Not that it's the sole factor or even the major factor. It may be, you know, inconsequential or minor factor. And then the program director for the psychiatry residency asked me to give some presentations on nutrition and mental health. So I put together a whole evidence-based program, kind of 5-part curriculum on nutrition and mental health. And they had zero training on this, which blew me away. These were people who would be responsible for the care of mentally ill patients, and they had no training whatsoever in nutrition. But to the credit of the program director, they asked me to come in, and I had my research team, you know, we read hundreds of articles to make sure everything was very supported by evidence. And they had no idea, for example, that alterations in the gut microbiome could affect mood, or changing the gut microbiome could reduce relapse rate for bipolar disorder or reduce readmission rates. And there's evidence to support that. So now that evidence, by the way, is preliminary, very preliminary, and needs a lot more research. You know, I don't want to overstate the evidence, but there is at least preliminary evidence to support that. So it's a long work, you know. It's a very slow process. If one's, you know, working to change a culture, it's not going to change in a day or a week or a month or even a year. It requires a real awareness of where people are at, a sensitivity, some diplomacy skills, and a whole lot of persistence. And I have a good dose of persistence or stubbornness, depending on your look. So
okay. I'm gonna let Selma make her question, and I am going to pick from the persistence. Okay.
Let me just hold on for 1 second.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes. As I understood, Dr. Allen, the question is to him. Your practice, daily practice, is integrative medicine, all right?
Yeah, I'm board certified in family medicine, primary care sports medicine, and integrative medicine, and I have a certification in medical acupuncture. So I kind of combine all those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as it is a large approach, I would like to know, at your clinical practice, what is the main approach which helps you to do the necessary change with your patient?
I say sure. If I understand your question, if we look at chronic disease, right? Mm-hmm. About 80% of chronic disease is related to lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. So is, you know, how people eat, do they exercise, do they get enough sleep, do they relate well to others, do they relate to a higher power that's meaningful and supportive to them? So that's 80% of chronic disease right there. But if we take a step back from that, I would say, you know, and this next statement is not scientific, it's just my own speculation but 80% of our choices in life are related to our emotional and energy state.
I agree.
Right? So the way I start with almost everybody now is very different than like how I started 10 years ago. I start with encouraging people to have some sort of daily centering.
Daily?
Centering or like meditation.
Okay.
So because if people don't have a daily centering, how are they supposed to make the right lifestyle choices? So behind the scenes of, if we look at chronic disease here, behind the scenes of chronic disease is lifestyle.
Lifestyle.
But behind the scenes of lifestyle is emotional and bioenergetic balance. So that's what I've come to in many years of practice. And so really where I need to start is helping people with emotional and bioenergetic balance. Now, this isn't linear, obviously. You know, if you help somebody eat slightly better, their emotional balance may be better. And then they may exercise a little more and they may be less irritable and they may relate better, et cetera. You know, so it's all one system. But it's really what I've come to is that at the center of healing is centering and connectedness, relationship. That's what's at the center. And so, yeah, that's where I start. You know, now it can be quite challenging to convince people of that because people don't understand that or get that often. But when people practice that way, they get a lot better. When they don't practice that, they don't get a lot better. You know, so and there's in no way negates or is disrespectful to other modalities. You know, I think there's a place for pills and procedures. There's certainly a place for surgery. You know, if I've got appendicitis, please get me a surgeon. You know, there's a place for everything. Of course, right? So there's nothing here that's kind of rigid or dogmatic or anything like that. But just as a very wide principle, the place to start is centering. And the place to start with centering is to hear the person's story, right? To really, really listen to the story and, you know, listen deeply because, you know, I think we've all had the experience when somebody actually took the time to listen deeply to our story. It in and of itself is very validating, I find, and very healing, just to hear somebody's story. So now there's some challenges here. One of them is that our language, you know, I know very little about narrative medicine, and you know, I'm not a linguist or something, but it has struck me that, for example, the word thinking can mean everything from Einstein, you know, discovering that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, to kind of unhelpful rumination. And so there's a poverty of language. I mean, there are some synonyms for the word thinking, you know, there's several, but there's a poverty of language in the English language for different levels of consciousness and different aspects of thinking. So I'm even wondering if narrative medicine could contribute and develop a more rich vocabulary. I just throw that out as an idea, you know, just a little brainstorm, because it's hard to talk about something if you don't have a language to talk about it. It's sort of like a carpenter trying to build a house and all they have is a hammer and they have a shovel, you know, but they really need a level and they need a measuring tape, but they don't have that, you know. So if the number one thing that I think, you know, all humans, you know, certainly including myself, need is a shift to greater consciousness. I mean, if we look at all the world's ills and you look at the ills in medicine of, you know, of disease, and of course there's genetics and bad luck and accidents and many things, other things. But I say one of the number one things is a shift of consciousness, both in patients and healers. And we don't have a very good language for that. We don't have a very good track record for that. We don't have a
hearing.
We don't have we don't have a good framework for that necessarily. But that's where I think kind of the money is of where we can make a difference, if that makes any sense. So
yeah, I would say that I know who has the language for that or what.
Okay.
And I would say it's poetry.
That's very
Whenever
interesting.
you create and you work with language in a creative way, poetry teaches. I mean, when I say poetry, I'm speaking of it in a very broad sense, right? Not only the strict poetry of verse and rhyme, not that, but poetry in the sense of creative language,
right?
Metaphorical language,
Yeah.
right? So you can increase your possibilities of addressing things, saying them differently. And I would like to, I am a literary critic, so when I read or a text or anything, I am looking for that. This is natural for me because this is my job, right?
Yeah,
so when I was reading your text, for example, two formal things, you were probably not aware that you just wrote your text, right? But when I read it, I can see two powerful structures in your text. I don't know if the persons who read them could see too, but one is metaphorical and the other is structural. One thing is the metaphor of the drum that keeps coming over and over your text, because the drum was a fact in the beginning. There was a drum, right? A thing. But then you speak about heartbeats, right? You speak about things that come and go, and the rhythm in some way is in the text. So, and the heart that stops, that beats and stops, right? And the drum is also in the story of the man that helped the tenants. Because when you say he died and came back, I was just thinking how beautiful this is, because he died, so his heart stopped, but came back. He started beating again. So there's a drum in your text, and this metaphor structures your narrative in some way. Because we all die and get back to life all the time, because our hearts stop for microseconds, right? So it comes and goes. So this beat, this yes, no, black, white, sound, silence, right? It's in us, right? And it's in your text too. So it's beautiful, right? How you did that. Probably you didn't think about it, but it's there.
No, I didn't think about it.
Right.
I do not think about any of this. This is very interesting to me, helpful to me, because I would actually.
You said that, so you're saying language is poor. Maybe when you create with language, it can address exactly what you meant to say,
Yeah.
Even if you're not very aware of that, and this is very nice, right? Okay. And look how your text is also a drum, because the text itself has this structure, and this is the second point that I would like to point out. The text has parts, and the parts have a silence, a temporal silence in between them.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have one boom, boom, boom of the drum, and then a silence,
Yeah.
which is the gap, the temporal gap. And then you have another boom, and then a silence, another boom, and then a silence.
Right.
And these temporal breaks are very powerful because you speak about the drums, but we can hear the drums in your text because we have sound and silence, sound and silence, sound and silence.
Yes.
So this is beautiful, and that's well, the essay is very beautiful for its theme and everything, but the form, you know, as I always say, Andrea is going to say, this is my advisor. She always says that. And I always say that the form is a content.
Right.
So your content is also in the form, even though you haven't thought about it.
No, I don't. You know, this is very new to me. This is actually very helpful and interesting.
Yeah.
I would actually like to learn to kind of express myself more in this way, and because this is very new to me.
You don't have to learn, you already know.
Okay, something inside knows, something deep inside knows. Yes.
Yeah, so we have another border here, the physician and the writer. And this is very nice too.
Okay, thank you.
Right? You're super welcome. Sure,
comment?
Go ahead.
So I think this talk is very inspiring, and the metaphor, I'm not sure it's a metaphor, but I think it is, of the rain in the desert. And your test was a rain in the desert for me because I'm a palliative care doctor, and I always in this border of death and life.
Yes.
And especially these days, I was facing so much suffering. And reading your text and seeing how this experience, I think this boom that Fabiana said for me is like this founding experience for you in your life, I think. And at the end, when you are able to act in the way that is similar to the rain in the desert, that goes back to the first image of the rain.
Yes.
When you were young. So it was I think it's very beautiful, the actual rain in the nature, and also what we can do with words being rain for who is in front of us. So yeah, really beautiful your text. Thank you. And also I want to say hello to everyone, because the first time I'm participated in GENAM, even though I'm a fan of GENAM because I listen to the podcast. And so nice to be here.
Yes.
Welcome.
What is your name? What is your name?
My name is Fatima. I was doing the palliative care residency in São Paulo, in USP. So that's when I met, I've heard of GENAM, but now I'm in the southeast of Brazil, in the state called Minas Gerais.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. This, and I'm sure you have a lot of stories to share and insight to share, you know, in people who are passing away, you know. So much we don't know. So
yeah, super nice. Does anyone else have? You're super welcome, Fernanda. Any comment, any question about the text? Because I'm gonna stick with the idea of the persistence now, because Alan has another story to share. Can I ask him to share the story of how he became a doctor? Can you tell us the story? Oh, please.
Yeah, so I was actually going to be a plant ecologist before I went to medicine. And because I like the relatedness or the connectedness, right, of all these different aspects of the ecosystem, like all the different plants. So I was doing research. I was doing a 5th year college research at the Smithsonian Institute at a research station out on Chesapeake Bay. So these are estuaries, right? But I felt I'm rather introverted, you know, I'm not naturally outgoing. So, and I felt there was something kind of in my soul that needed to relate to other human beings more. And these botanists were very nice, but let's say their social skills were somewhat limited. So
he's speaking about plants. Did you get it, right?
yes, I mean, if you relate to plants all day long, you know, so they're very nice, but it just didn't feel quite right. So
I have to say that Alan is a farmer. He has a huge plantation at his home here.
I still love plants. I still love plants. So
lots of things. What do you have there? Let's just mention.
I have either a very large garden or a small farm, depending on your point of view. So, you know, I have like pumpkins and squash and corn and, you know, mustard and collards and kale and carrots and parsnips. You know, I have all the usual crops, and I plant a lot of heirloom, you know, so they're not just the modern, they're heirlooms, you know, from a long time ago. Like I actually plant Hopi corn from the Hopi Indians, so which somehow grows in New Jersey. It's a very different climate.
Sorry, I had to interrupt you for that. Okay, continue.
No worries. Yeah. So I decided I you know, maybe I should look into other fields besides being an ecologist. So, you know, I'm just this naive college student. So I asked him, and I said, well, you know, what other fields? Well, maybe medicine. So, you know, so I asked some of my colleagues, well, how would I learn something about medicine? And they said, well, you know, maybe you should talk to a doctor. Well, that makes sense. I said, okay, well, how would I talk to a doctor? And I said, maybe I should go to a hospital or something and talk to doctors or something. So I said, is there any hospital nearby that I could talk to doctors? And they said, well, there's one called Johns Hopkins, which of course is world famous, right? I knew nothing about this. So I said, well, okay, what type of medicine should I, you know, learn about? So I said, well, maybe I should see, because I always liked using my hands, so maybe I should see an operation. So Elia will get a laugh out of this. So I called up the
I have to laugh.
Johns Hopkins University as this college student, right? And
do you guys know that Johns Hopkins is one of the most famous university medical schools in the world, right? So Alan did that.
So I called up Johns Hopkins. I called the main number and said, hi, my name's Alan. Could I like see an operation or something? And they said, well, who are you? I said, well, you know, I'm kind of this college student. I'm doing some research in plant ecology. And I thought maybe I should go into medicine. And they said, well, you can't just like, you know, walk in here and see an operation. But they're very polite and accommodative. So they transferred me to the surgical department. So the secretary of the surgical department gets on the line and says, and I say, hi, my name's Alan. Could I like kind of see an operation or something? Because I'm kind of interested in medicine. I don't know anything about medicine. And they said, well, you can't just, you know, come in here and just see an operation. So they said, well, you know, we'll see what we can do. And they're very polite, but kind of hung up. And so every week I called. So every week I called for like several weeks. And after a while, the secretary of the surgical department at Johns Hopkins University got to know me. She would pick up the line. She actually started recognizing my number or something. And this is the day before cell phones or anything, right? And she said, is this Alan? I said, yes, it's Alan. So probably just to get me out of their hair. Finally, after like weeks of this, you know, I call one more time, and the secretary says, okay, come to Johns Hopkins University at a certain, you know, site at a certain door. They'll give you a volunteer pass and they'll tell you what to do. So the time arrives, the day arrives, and I get in my little Volkswagen Beetle, which is third hand, you know, this ancient, very old car, put, put, put. And I have a map out on the passenger seat. And I drive up, I have to literally get up at like 4 in the morning or something to get at Johns Hopkins at the correct time. And I arrive on time, and there's a guard, a sentry guard, and he gives me a little pass and he says, okay, go up these stairs, you know, go up for like 4 flights and then walk down this hall and then make a left and then make a right. He gives me these complex instructions. So I follow, you know, I put my little badge on, this little, you know, college student, and I walk up these stairs and I go down the hall, make a left and then a right. And I open the door I'm supposed to enter, and I walk in and there's nobody else there. And I look down and I'm right above one of the main operating suites at Johns Hopkins University at what's called an observation deck. And so they have these like slanted glass observation in a kind of a long rectangle. I'm only person there. And I look down, and as I look down, they're ratcheting with a ratchet. They're opening a man's chest who's laying on the operating table. And the chest opens wider and wider, and they have a bovie, and they're doing surgery and dissecting down, and you can actually smell, you know, a little bit of the burnt flesh. And they're dissecting down till they get down to the heart. And the surgeon takes these paddles, and this man is hooked up to a machine, and you can see these tubes coming out, and he stops the heart. And there's blood. You see this blood going into this machine. There's a little delay of like several seconds, and then you see oxygenated blood coming out, going back into the man. It's a heart-lung machine that's keeping this man alive. And I apparently was witnessing one of the earlier coronary artery bypass grafts that were fairly new. Not the first one, of course, which was done by DeBakey in Houston, I think. But I was witnessing one of the earlier coronary artery bypass grafts. And I watched the whole operation. There was nobody to share this with or process it. And I decided I'm going to be a doctor. And what really struck me was, it was almost like a symphony. I was so amazed with these surgeons, because the surgeon would turn and they put their hand out, and the scrub nurse would put an instrument in with a very definitive, almost like a little slap. And the surgeon's hand would close and they would do their surgery. And it was like everybody was cooperating, and it was like a symphony orchestra. There was this harmony in the operating suite that it was this relationship and connectedness and harmony that really struck me. And that's when I decided to become a doctor, actually, was an experience witnessing what a surgeon did. So that's my little tale. So
Isn't it amazing?
But I was
as
very
I told you, not
Are
just
we talking about drums again? Are we talking
yes,
about
exactly.
music
Exactly.
and drums and again and again?
See, Alan, there's a relation.
You are a very musical person, as I noticed.
Yeah.
This experience was prepared especially to him. Yes, the God.
Yeah. Yeah.
God.
And you know, Alan made him a very, Alan Goodhart, when we were listening to this story, Alan made a very good question to Alan Remde. Do you remember, Alan, which question was that? Can you make it again? Let me see if I remember. You don't remember?
Are you asking Alan Goodhart?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're muted, Alan.
You got to do it for me.
Okay. So the question was, what struck him very much at that, seeing that? Because the story was, okay, and then I decided to be a doctor. Alan Remde, gave one answer to this question right now, right? The harmony, the symphonic movement.
Yeah.
But there was one thing that had to be with hands.
Yeah.
Remember that?
My hands. Yeah. Yeah.
That he was telling us that day that the fact that the instruments went right to the hands, right?
Yeah.
And then the thing that related probably.
Well, yeah.
The work with plants, with the work with people, the hands, right?
Alan, when you just told the story, you put that part in. But when you told us, up the street there, when we're talking, I wanted what was going on along with what you saw. And at that time, you told us.
Yeah. Yeah.
There. At this time, it's right where it should have been, because it's not just the symphony. It's just what's in you that you've got that's special.
Mm-hmm.
And now I believe every single thing about it entirely. I wish everybody could find a way, that way. My way of finding what I did was just dumb luck, which I recognized.
Mm-hmm.
But you did it yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hélio, wanna speak about the surgery thing?
So that's why I say that being a surgeon is worse than being a clinician, because, it's visuals. And another thing that I learned today is how to get in Johns Hopkins. So I will try it. Okay. But no, it's amazing how things are connected.
Yeah.
And Fabiana asked, or Bronya asked about your colleagues, how they feel and how they think about this. My concern is about the residents, the students, because I know doctors, they are already head made it or mind made it. It's very difficult to change them, but the residents, the new ones, I think they are the source to be working with. And it's interesting that you said about this integrated medicine, and I was thinking that we usually switch. We just put out all the old medicine or the ancient medicine, and we just want to change to the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And what you learn, you teach us, is that that's not the way. You are actually putting them together.
Yeah.
We are talking about centering. You are almost talking about humor theory, the 4 humor theories.
Yeah.
That we have 4 humors, and good health is when they are exactly in the center. They are equalized. So
but Alan is doing that With
by
evidence.
words.
With
Yeah,
evidence.
With evidence and textually.
Humor theory with evidence.
With words and textually, you know. This is very interesting. I love it. It's amazing. Anybody else?
I just got a message from Kadu. Kadu is the medical coordinator of GENAM with me. He was here, but he had to get out because his internet is not good. He just sent me a message telling me to tell you, Alan, that you shall be a very, very good doctor because you inspire an ambience of peace. So this is his message for you.
Well, Fabiana, let me tell you something now. If we want to know about the results of this integrated medicine, of course, I sniffed your CV, so I sniffed into it. I can tell that your patients have you in a very high account, and how do you the statements? They are very, very powerful statements. So, congratulations, Alan. You're very impressed. I'm very.
I have Alan a very high account too as a friend.
Me too.
And now as a writer and wonderful narrator. You know, you crossed the border today too.
Yeah,
you came to the side of the writers.
This is not
to the good side of the force. Come on.
This is you know, a little outside my comfort zone, honestly, and actually I really like, you know, this group, and I don't know if it'd be possible if I could join, or, you know, when I have time. So I'd be very interested
whenever you want.
because there's something I'm realizing the importance of writing and narrating and telling stories more than I did before. So I've learned a lot. So
thanks a lot. We learned a lot too. And, you know, keep your drums going. Hélio, anybody else wants to? Selma, please. Okay.
Yes, please. Dr. Ellen, I'd like to know if you have some experience with Ayurveda School of Medicine.
We have a review of all the major healing systems, you know, around the world, including Ayurvedic, but by no means am I an Ayurvedic practitioner, which of course is a whole field, but I have a lot of respect for it. You know, a lot of these ancient systems are kind of thought as, at best, kind of naive and not very scientific, but actually my take is that a lot of them are highly sophisticated, in fact, way more sophisticated in some aspects than Western medicine, though we have to be real because Western medicine is way more sophisticated in other ways. So Western medicine in general, I would say, is way more sophisticated when it comes to anatomy and physiology, surgery, emergency medicine, pharmacology, but the Ayurvedic medicine and also Chinese medicine are way more sophisticated when it comes to harmony and balance, and they have a much more sophisticated vocabulary, even theoretical framework for harmony and balance. This just is kind of my own amateur take on this, you know, take it, you know, for what it's worth. But some of these systems are highly sophisticated in that way, but they're also quite unsophisticated in many Western ways. And I think we have to be real about that. And that's why I think combining them both in a responsible, careful, evidence-informed way makes a whole lot of sense. These aren't just kind of sentimental throwbacks to the past. They're highly sophisticated way beyond Western medicine in some aspects, even though very undeveloped in other aspects, if that makes sense. That's my take on it, for what it's worth.
Right. Yeah, I shall agree. I have some knowledge about that. I'm not a physician, of course, but as a practitioner of yoga many years, and I've been, witnessing some Ayurveda encounters and meetings and blah, blah, blah. So I have to agree with Alan for as long as I know, right?
Yeah.
As far as I know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another doctor here who is Kelly. Kelly, can I just pinch you a little bit? She was in my graduate course. She was one of the students in my last graduate course along this last semester. And she's maybe I could say you were a general practitioner, Jack?
I'm an infectious disease specialist.
Okay. And she had, during my course, I asked the students to, most of the time, start our discussions with some works of art. So watercolor, poetry, portraying, photography, collage, and many other artistic ways of getting to the most unknown parts of the students, which was a challenge for them.
Yeah.
I know that it was. But last week, Jackie was telling me that the course was transformative for her.
Was
so
what?
Transformative for her. So could you say in a few words how and why art was transformative for you?
Yeah, I think, and I'm practicing now, the most important thing I've learned is listen. Listen to me, listen to the patient, listen to the word. So I'm exercising. I have so many things to say, but I'm trying to listen first, elaborating, and it's a new way to approach the patient. I listen first, then I create a hypothesis, a therapeutic proposal, and so I think it's the most important thing to listen, but I'm still processing all the learnings.
Yeah, I like to, I want to tell a story about Jackie, if I may, of course. When first artistic activity that I asked the students to make during the course, during the classes, was watercolor. And watercolor is very interesting because many people complain that they don't like watercolor because it's more difficult to get the paint in control, to control the paint, right? So, but that was my goal. I wanted them to lose control, to have the experience of losing control, because in my mind, if you were a physician, if you were a healthcare professional, you have a person in front of you. And as Alan himself said, the one thing that you don't have about other people is control. You don't have, in the limit, you don't have control over anything, right? But we are always trying to take control of things, to get control of things. So that was the first activity. And she told me, I don't know what's going to happen to me because I don't like to work with my hands. And I said, okay, now you're gonna do it right now. And it's so beautiful to see that in the end, she could find a meaning for that. And, and I think this is maybe art is a way of finding some meaning, finding some sense in things that sometimes are very difficult to understand, to comprehend, and in a very practical way. So maybe the practicality of hands was also what Dr. Allen was looking for when he was enchanted by the idea of the surgery, right? Because the body leads a learning, not only the mind.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a beautiful experience that I share with you, that I had with Jackie in the last graduate course. Thank you. Hey, anything else? Any other comment? Alan, do you want to say anything?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your group. This was really, it's really interesting, and I feel I've learned something, and there's something in this direction of expressing oneself and writing that I think is important for me personally. And so I'm kind of glad I joined.
Yeah, and you were among humans, see?
Yeah.
We're a little more talkative than plants. Thank you so very much for being with us tonight. That was amazing. Your text is super good. I think we're going to have a writer pretty soon, because Hélio is publishing his first book, right?
Oh, I see. You're inspiring me, Elia.
Yeah. And that's it. Thank Ellen and everyone for being here. Bronia, that came especially for this session. All the students and Selma, and very, very, very nice. And especially thank you, Ellen, for sharing your time and your experience with us. Well, bye-bye. See you next time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Was really a pleasure.
Yeah, it was.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you.